Welcome to Zen and the Art of Real Estate Investing. What if you could learn from experienced real estate investors, find out what got them to where they are now, get insight into their daily habits, and take these insights to inspire your own growth? Each week, Jonathan Green shares an in-depth look at the mindful approach to real estate investing. Jonathan is a lifelong real estate investor, advisor, and coach, as well as the founder and team leader of Streamlined Properties. Whether you're looking to start from scratch, get to the next level, or just for a straightforward and honest approach to real estate investing, Jonathan seeks to provide a free mentorship program you can take with you anywhere. Now, here's Jonathan.
Thanks for showing up for another episode of Zen and the Art of Real Estate Investing. This is a short-term rental show, but it has a different twist because we're going deep on hospitality with Katie Cline. We're going to talk about finding sweet success, because that's also the name of her podcast, through short-term rental hospitality, based on her background working for some of the biggest hotel chains in the world. Let's get to it. This is episode 216 of Zen and the Art of Real Estate Investing with my guest, Katie Cline. Katie is a senior global public relations and communications leader and brand builder and storyteller and the host of Sweet Success. But she has also, in the last 3 years, gotten into short-term rentals with her hospitality background. Katie, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a joy to be here.
Yeah, I'm excited to use your background to give people a little bit of a wider scope on what's going on in the business. But why did you go into short-term rentals when you did? Because it's something that obviously you started to learn about, but what was the impetus for you to go and do it?
I've always been interested in real estate, but I never felt confident enough or thought I had enough money to actually get involved in it.
Yeah.
It's a funny side story. I was living in Astoria, Queens when I was, in my earlier 20s, and they had redone these pre-war buildings, and they made the one-bedroom apartments look very nice inside, and they, added some string lights and called it a courtyard between the buildings, and they were selling them for about $350,000 at that time. And it was still an unapproachable price for me then of where I was, but more so I thought to myself, well, surely how much can a one bedroom ever appreciate? Well, those are going for $750 now. So lesson learned. But to answer your question, I, like you said, come from a really deep background of hospitality. I led global PR and communications for some of the world's best hotel brands like Ritz-Carlton, W Hotels, St. Regis, Luxury Collection. And I had been living in the UK for about 6 years when my husband and I decided we wanted to move back to the States. Unfortunately, my mom is very sick, so I wanted to be close to her. So we moved back to Astoria in Queens in New York City. And we thought, well, this market is very expensive. Gone were the $350,000 apartments. And also, we didn't know what our long-term plan was. We didn't know if we wanted to be here for a while. So we weren't sure that we wanted to even consider buying in New York City. So we thought this is a good moment to actually try buying something upstate in upstate New York. My husband and I had been camping many times near Lake George. I just absolutely fell in love with the area. And on every camping trip on day 2, when I was like dirty and missing, hot water and all the modern conveniences of homes, I would always think, wouldn't it be nice to own a house here one day? And so anyway, right before we moved back to New York, I saw this perfect property on Zillow, and it was right before Thanksgiving, and it was still on the market. And I thought, well, if it doesn't go off the market before Thanksgiving, surely no one buys real estate, in November and December. It went off the market, but then lucky for me, a 1031 exchange fell through. So the property came back on the market. And within 3 days of moving back to the country, we saw the property. On the 4th day, we made an offer that was accepted. And that really began my short-term rental journey. And what is so interesting to me coming from the hotel space is I really see our job as host. I really see us as hospitality. Yes, we are real estate investors, and that's what most likely attracted us to the space in the first place. But the second we open our doors to guests, they need to become the priority. And so I'm in so many Facebook groups or online forums, and people are, trying to save money and being like, I don't need to provide shampoo and conditioner. One roll of toilet paper is enough. They can bring their own. And I'm like, we're missing the point here. And the good news is when you put hospitality first, I think it really drives your ADR and your occupancy as well. So it's good for business too.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes complete sense. And I do, so many inexperienced operators got into the business, but that includes yourself as inexperienced in short-term rentals.
Yeah.
But the way that you're looking at it is also part of what you do. It's brand building because, okay, if we give the best service over time, that's going to compound, as opposed to the other side that you're talking about. If you're always short on toilet paper because you're cheap and you don't want to spend an extra 99 cents, that's going to compound the other way. And that little error can have a gigantic effect on your algorithmic integrity over the long term, right?
Sometimes inexperience is good, right? It means
Yeah.
we don't have a playbook that we're going by. We're not saying this is how it's always been done, so this is how it continues to be done. There's a market in Maine, York Beach, that my husband's family has been vacationing in since his parents were children. And we love it there. It's a market I would definitely like to invest in. And what is so interesting is it's such a tried and true vacation rental market that they're still doing Saturday to Saturday rentals. This last summer, I had to physically mail a check to the owner for a very large sum of money, by the way.
Yeah.
And that's how I secured the booking. And then, by the way, I had to pay extra for linens, which were folded on the bed. So the first thing I had to do when I arrived to my vacation that I paid a very large sum of money for was make my own bed.
Yeah,
and I just think for some of us, when we come into that market and we say, this is not the playbook we have to follow anymore, we're gonna see the returns come, whether it be from guests choosing us or from being able to charge higher rates.
Yeah. And I think it makes sense. I mean, I think everybody has a background that can be of some use in real estate investing. You just have to figure out what your competitive advantage is. So you're taking a competitive advantage and putting it right at play. Whereas other people, maybe they're on the data side, so they're doing the data, and maybe their short-term rental isn't as flashy, but maybe it's very efficient. So there's things to be said for each way, but I do agree with what you were talking about before. I think the failure to do the small things is going to be a long-term disaster, especially in a market that exploded. People think is bloated, which it's really not. It's just you have to be better at it in order to make money now.
Yeah. And it comes down to like who your target guest is. So like you were saying about efficiency, that is a key market for some people.
Yeah.
My husband and I recently were staying someplace and we just wanted to stay for a night. We wanted a clean place. We wanted, price was a main factor for us. So if that's your target guest, you don't need to be doing all of the bells and whistles. It's really about kind of thinking about who you're catering to. And a lot of times I think the best place to start with that is cater to yourself. That's what we did with our Lake George property. That's what we do with our place in Saratoga Springs.
Yeah.
We have a young child. So I provide things like a pack and play, and I provide a really nice mattress for that as well, because I don't like my daughter just sleeping on the flat pack and play one, or there's a high chair there. We used to have a dog. So we provide dog bowls and a dog treat and towels that the dog can use so that they don't have to use my white ones as well. So little touches and nods that make that target audience more comfortable, make them feel more welcomed. It's not something that I'm putting in my listing and saying, hey, if you stay with me, I give you a towel for your dog to use. No one cares. That's not going to affect their booking decision. But when they arrive, it's those little touches that I think make them feel really looked after.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think that you want them to always feel that the value is increasing every day that they're there. And, we've all stayed at short-term rentals where they're missing something, but it's kind of not a big deal. There's no colander. I always use this colander as an example because there was somebody who once told us at a short-term rental that we didn't have enough colanders and there was 2. And I was like, how much pasta are you making? Like, I don't understand. Why would I have more than 2 colanders? That's not a good use of space. Or do the dishes in
between the use of the 2.
But like, there's good comments and bad comments. Yes. And I think that to understand that, going the extra mile, if you are missing something that's of non-significance, but you also have a clearly laid out dog towels and a dog bed and nice mattresses, they don't care.
Right.
And they'll probably just go to the store and get it themselves. Whereas that other person who has a bare bones and then only is like, hey, you can only have 1 roll of toilet paper, get it yourself if you run out. I'm already not happy. And I think that's what you're saying and bringing. And there are people who are good at hospitality, but with your background, you're looking at it at a lens like, from what I know already, is long-term, not short-term one stay. It's how can we keep building on this so it becomes that recurring income?
Yeah. And one of the lessons that I take from the hotel world I like to think about it as the art of the arrival, much to the points that you were just making. So when I was working for Le Méridien, we did some proprietary research that proved the first 10 minutes of a guest stay really sets the tone for the entire experience. And, as travelers, we can all agree with that. So for a hotel, it means, what does the lobby look like? And what does the porte-cochere look like? And what does the key cards look like, et cetera, et cetera. But for us as short-term rentals, I think about it as, did I give you adequate directions, or did you drive past the house 3 times? If you're arriving at night, did the light come on for you? And did it stay on long enough for you to take the baby out of the car or the suitcases out of the car? Did you have to dig around for a physical key, or did I give you a personalized key code that was able to let you in right away?
Yeah.
Do I have my HVAC being able to be operated remotely so I can make sure that the house is either cold or hot for you when you're actually arriving?
That's such my pet peeve. So my pet peeve when it's burning hot in there and they didn't send anyone over to turn it on. That happened to me this summer in Socrates. And I was just like, why?
I mean, our place in Lake George is a cabin in the woods, and it is so cozy in the winter. But if you walk in there and it's like 40 degrees in there, you're not in a good mood. You're upset, right?
Your first worry is that, the heat's not working.
Exactly.
And then you go into panic mode. And then from there, you start that trend of now you're looking for problems.
Yeah,
even if it turns out.
That is it.
Yeah, but that's, I think, really what you're saying. It's such a smart advice that the arrival is so important because, I think people who are operating forget. When you're going to stay anywhere, you've been on a long trip, even if it's an hour, you're in the car with kids, they're throwing cereal over into the front, they barf on themselves, the dog has to go to the bathroom. By the time you get there, you just want that, thank God somebody cares about me. I stayed at a short term in Asheville this summer, and I got there and I could not figure out where the place was. This is crazy. It's 2 houses connected, but it just there was no picture of the entrance.
Yeah.
When I got in, there was a bunch of cookies. So I was like, and it was really nice when I got to the entry. They could have done a better job of getting me a photo of how I got there, but I kind of had to go through and see. And I was like, no, they did a pretty good job. It was me just being kind of nervous and tired.
Yeah, but if it's happening to you, that makes me think it's happened to other people before.
Yeah.
And whether you shared that feedback or somebody else, I always if I hear something twice, I think it's time to action it. We had one of our mattresses in our upstairs bedroom. We had somebody say it's not very comfortable. And it was the first time we heard it. And we were kind of like, I don't know, it feels fine to us. We, none of our family members have complained. But as we all know, family members are not good litmus tests because they're nice most of the time. Depending on
they want you to succeed, but won't tell you what's going to make you fail.
Exactly. They're not going to be like, hey, actually, it wasn't super comfortable. And also my parents typically stayed there and they're very easygoing people. Right. But the second time we got, hey, that mattress isn't comfortable, I was like, done. We are replacing that mattress. Figure it out. And luckily we live in a time that you can get affordable furniture and it will make a difference. Another thing that was said to us was the toilet paper wasn't soft enough. And I thought, what? Fair enough. It's a high ADR property and they're feeling
I have a pet peeve with toilet paper too. I just don't like one ply, but also there's toilet issues, especially when you're remote. So that would be something that I would bring up hey, this is a flushing issue for a lot of people, especially if you're on septic or something else.
Right.
But yeah, I think it's a great point. One time you consider it and say, hey, what else have they said?
Yeah.
If they have 9 complaints, they're just a pain.
Totally.
There's no question. But if they have 1 complaint and they're very, what I do, and I want to get your opinion on this as a host, how you would receive it. So when I go, I do start, I tell them stuff. And I hope they don't take it as, hey, I'm going to leave you a bad review. I'm just giving them updates. Hey, this window clamp is broken. It doesn't open. Because I tell them in advance, I've been doing this a long time. So I'm just going to give you some feedback. I think it's helpful. Some people take it the wrong way. They're already worried. And I'm just telling you, the window's broken. I don't care, but somebody's going to care.
And I think that goes back to how did we set the tone for you from the beginning? I've had guests who I don't know personally, who aren't hosts, do that same thing to me. But I think I built so much trust with them in my communications from the onset that they're like, hey, by the way, your cleaners left some laundry in the dryer, or
Yeah,
this
yeah.
isn't
Right.
working, or whatever. And typically that would be a ding against you. But because they know I answer instantly and I hold
Yeah.
their hand too, like I kind of see myself as a bit of a concierge. I know the neighborhood, I know the area, I can recommend what's open, what's not open. Doesn't mean I'm calling and making reservations for these people.
Yeah.
But I really take the
Yeah.
time to think, okay, this group is a group of girlfriends celebrating a bachelorette versus this group is a multi-generational family who has, parents in their 70s and 80s and a young
Yeah.
child. So I'm not going to recommend the same things for those people. And I think the short-term rental industry is a little too obsessed with automation. Yes, we should be.
I could agree. I don't use AI at all. I've just started using it more for just like every time I have like a medical thing that's nothing. I just want to cure myself by that. But yeah, I think it's devaluing the personalization, especially when people say, "Oh, well, it sounds just like me," but it's not. It's not you. And eventually, someone's going to know.
I just booked a week in the Finger Lakes at a lake house. It was expensive for me. Maybe it's not expensive for the market, but it was expensive for me to spend for just my immediate family. And the first and only message I've received was an automated one. And I just feel like this is our moment as short-term rental operators to give ourselves a leg up against hotels. That's what you get with a hotel, right? When you book a hotel, you get a automated confirmation email. That's what you expect. That's what you want. Fine.
Yeah.
But this is my moment to say like, hey, I'm Katie and you're staying at my place. And how can I help you? And make them feel really like special and seen. And I think that's where we have the ability to stand out. And going back to what we were talking about earlier, I think some people get so fixated on like cost, whether it be the cheapest toilet paper or least rolls. I saw conversations recently about people locking their ACs so that it can't get too cold or it can't go too hot. Now, if it's for a plumbing issue, I'm not talking about that. But like,
but then you would tell them in advance.
Exactly. And I just feel like,
or get it fixed.
Like if they want it at 90 degrees, they're crazy, but also like they want it at 90 degrees, they're paying for it. Yeah. So I just think we get a little too fixated on the wrong things. Like they're not doing us a favor staying there. This is a transaction. They have paid us money. Right. We are delivering an experience.
Yeah, and I think it's just, again, it's short-sighted. I always say when people are being cheap, your margins just aren't high enough, which means you're not doing a good enough job operationally to be significant enough that you can say, you know what? Yeah, they like it. I like it colder. I'm not putting it at 50, right. But I also don't want it to be hot, which is going back to what you said. When I get to a place in the summer and they haven't turned the air on, I'm annoyed. The best thing about I don't like hotels. I don't like staying in them just because I don't have a kitchen and laundry. I just like to have creature comforts. But I do like when I go in and it's blasting freezing. I'm like, they get me. They get me. But I wanted to go back to the concierge thought because that's what I think is so important. When short-term rentals started 20 years ago, or even longer, I used to stay at short-term rentals and what were timeshares. The people would always be there, and I'm like awkward. I don't want to talk to someone and get a tour of the place. And some people still do it, the old school ones. The thing about a concierge, which is great, they're there when you need them. They have the best information, but they're not bought. They don't contact you. You contact them. Right. And when you contact them, they're available, and they have the restaurant recommendation right away.
I couldn't agree more.
That's important for.
I'm very similar in the sense, like when I arrive, and just for what you said, it's a long drive and kids are throwing Cheerios or vomiting or whatever.
Yeah,
like,
the norm.
I don't want to like get out and like be like, hello, nice to meet you. Let me put my like proper self on. I'm like, I just want to like get unpacked and get settled and like relax in my space. So I assume that for my guests as well. I'm also, 3.5 hours south of both of my properties, but I really like pride myself on responding like almost instantly because I just think that again mitigates any concerns they have. It makes them feel like someone's going to be there and taken care of. And then they give me a bit of benefit of the doubt for the times that I might have missed it or something. And I think, like you said, it's not about like, you don't need to, even in hotels, sometimes nice hotels do this too, where like the butler is going to show you around. And I'm like, I know how to work a Keurig. Like,
so annoying.
I can figure out the television. Like, please get out of my space. But like you said, virtually, to know that like someone else is on the other side who cannot say like, anyone can run a Google search and say best restaurants in Bolton Landing. And I forget what destination I was in, but I did that once. And the number one spot in TripAdvisor for whatever city in the world I was in was KFC.
Applebee's. Yeah, I knew it. I knew it. Yeah. But you're exactly right. So when I go to a restaurant, almost always, if I haven't been there, I just ask the server what's the best thing on the menu. And when I go to a short-term rental, wherever I am, my sister got married, 20 some odd years ago in Cape Hatteras, and we were just like, where's the best place to stay? Tell us what to do. Tell us the restaurants to go to. We like this type of food. And that the coolest thing about technology that can assist without the automation is now you can do so much in advance for them with your own little guidebook. Yep. But I like what you're saying, that you can also use those, but also give them some personalization based on what they're doing. Hey, this might be a little bit different for your dog. These are the places to watch out for. That's really appreciative for kids and pets, and for people who are older, or anybody with a physical limitation. Like, hey, there's some extra steps here that might, you want to at least pay attention to first.
Or dietary. I had someone reach out and say, we're coming for my friend's birthday and she's vegan. So where can I eat? Now that took me a little bit of time to research, but this is where technology comes in, I think, is I don't need AI to answer them, but I can set, the automated messages, or I can have a Google document with my recommendations. So these things are not taking me a lot of time, but they're making them feel like really special and look after. So I use like the templates in Airbnb, but I personally hit send on them every time because I started using automated messages. And what I found is it wasn't delivering the level of service that I wanted to bring. And I have 2 properties. So I understand some people listening have 10, 20, 100, 400.
Yeah.
So I'm not saying that this is for everybody. But for me as like a more boutique operator, I don't want to send a message that says, what brings you to town, when someone booked for the Belmont Stakes weekend in Saratoga.
Right.
That makes me look like I have no idea what's going on in my town. Of course, I know what brings you to town, right? And I think to that point too, something else we need to remember from hotels is when someone books a hotel room, they don't need to justify what they're coming for and why they're there. I like to send my first message, and in it, I do ask some open-ended questions like, what brings you to town? Have you been here before? I see you're traveling with a pet. We'll leave some dog bowls out for you. Or I see you're traveling with a young child. We have a pack and play if that might be helpful, those little things. But if they don't reply, that's up to them. It's like you said about the concierge, like, I'm telling you I'm here, I'm available, I'm interested in talking to you if you'd like. But if you don't want to, that's okay too.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's important because I think, the boundaries of travel changed during the pandemic. So we were all hands off on getting in. So a lot of people had to adjust. But for a lot of people like me, who's a very strong introvert, I really don't want that awkward small talk. It's just uncomfortable. And again, it's after a long voyage to get there. So the last thing that, you usually have to go to the bathroom, clean up your kid, anything like I just want to get in the house. The worst thing that you can do, that which we were talking about before with the importance of the arrival, is make it hard to get in. If you can't get into the property, again, you're just starting on a bad foot. You have to start on a good foot, or else people become nitpickers. I would be too. When you walk in and door handle's broken, you're like, well, now I think that teapot kind of looks dirty. I can't stop myself.
Same.
So I really need that, that opening. But it's important that you mention that. How do you look at it at scale? Like, just say you go from 2 to 5 or from 5 to 10. The way that I think of it, there's still a way to bring you in it by training someone to be you. And partially using automation, like you said, as a catch-all for something easy, but reviewing it.
Yeah.
Saying like, oh, well, this is what's going to go out. I'm going to press send, maybe add a little bit something there.
Yeah, I don't think I'm an expert in that yet. And I'm not sure if I have interest in becoming an expert in that. I do think I would like to own and operate 5 to 10 short-term rentals. And then maybe, I have one long-term rental back in London in the UK.
Yeah.
Maybe some more, of that type of strategy mixed in as well. But I do think like, there's not enough chatter about that in this world, in terms of like, it's not always about bigger, more, many doors, all that kind of thing. Like, I might be making the same profit as someone who has 10x the amount of doors as me. So I think really encouraging people to say like, well, what is actually your goal here? And going back to what you were talking about with being an introvert, there are so many different personality types. There's so many different cultural nuances that come in with our guests that you really need to be someone who likes talking to people and who doesn't get defensive and who doesn't take things personally and who can really maintain that level of like graciousness and professionalism with them. Because if you're someone who just wants people to pay for your beach house, you probably shouldn't be hosting them. And it doesn't mean you shouldn't be investing in short-term rentals, but maybe you should hire a management company, or maybe you should hire a co-host. Like, take that off of your plate. I saw that firsthand with friends of ours. They had invested in a place in the Hamptons, and that is a tricky market. You know, the target demographic there is going to be different than the travelers who are visiting my places in Lake George and Saratoga. The expectations are going to be higher in terms of, you know, instantaneousness or cleanliness or what the design and decor looks like. And after a year, they just said, this is not for us, and ended up selling the asset. So I would encourage people to like set their own goals and just think, what works for me? What do I want this to be long-term? And then, like you said, other things will arise and you might say, wow, I love this and I want to grow. And then you can think about ways, do you build a team? How do you utilize technology in a smart way to make sure that you're maintaining your own standards?
Yeah, there was something that you said before that I wanted to touch back on that I think is really important. The table stakes are so high for these experiential, you know, short-term rentals, but you don't have to do that. The cabins in the woods do well as well. And also places that are intentionally low key and written and described and furnished that way and acknowledged like, hey, if you're looking for the bells and whistles, this isn't it. We have everything you need, but like, this is it. You know, we have a 25-inch TV. That's it. I think it's just really important to be transparent, because that, again, is part of you pre-setting that arrival. So the disappointment on arrival can even be curb appeal. Hey, it doesn't look like it did. Mm-hmm. You know, that's happened to me. We pulled up in Los Angeles, where before the regulations, we used to stay there all the time. And it was just it was a real bait and switch. The house didn't look like it, and they had like a ton of stuff in the back, and we canceled right away. You know, and we're like, how did this happen to us? We've been doing this for 20 years. Some people just, they, you know, you need a place and there's not as many available. Now there's obviously a lot, but yeah, I think you can set them up even before arrival the right way on just making sure that you're very transparent about the pros and cons of your place for the guests.
It's like that old adage of under promise and over deliver. We want our photos to look great. And I'm a huge fan of professional photos. I mean, we are a business, you know,
Same.
We need to treat ourselves as such. And I think when I, as a guest, am looking and I see that someone shot iPhone photos, or Jonathan, I can't even tell you, we're going to London in a couple of weeks, and I'm looking for a short-term rental there because I'm traveling with my young daughter. I want to be in my old neighborhood, which doesn't have a lot of hotels, and the amount of photos where the bed isn't made. And I'm just like,
that doesn't even make sense. That's just insane.
And that tells me like that if that's a level of precision you put into like essentially what is your advertising, it's going to be clean when I arrive. Are you going to take care of me if a problem arises? Like all those little things, right? That are like subliminally communicating things as well. So yes.
I hope you're enjoying this episode with Katie Cline. Now, you heard in the intro, and we probably already talked about her podcast, Sweet Success with Katie Cline. You can find that at Sweet, and that's SUITE, successpodcast.com. You'll see an episode soon with me on there. It's probably already out by the time this episode comes out, but I don't know, because we might be in a race. So stay tuned, check out her podcast, and now check out the rest of ours. And I think this, you know, the segmentation of the owners of short-term rentals has been the thing that has created this kind of backlash against them in a lot of areas. You see, like New York City is now backtracking on what they were saying because obviously the data isn't playing out. You know, short-term rentals aren't ruining or taking housing away. Right. They're providing a lot of options for people, especially with the, you know, invent and addition of midterm rentals now. Yeah. But yeah, I think there's a lot that goes into it that people don't understand really what they're doing. And that goes back to something else that I wanted to touch on. It's really the avatar. I talk about this with a lot of people, and I talk about it in any business. You know, you were saying before, your Lake George avatar was you. Mm-hmm. And I think that that works perfectly because there's a subset of people who are generally like you who are going to go. So you already know like that set,
Yep.
and then you're going to see what else works. But if you don't know your avatar and you try to appeal to everybody, you definitely won't.
Yes.
It's like a cookie cutter house. That does nothing for me.
Yes.
A McMansion. It just doesn't do anything for me. I see why people like it because everything's new and it's clean and you can customize it, but it's just not my thing. But when you shoot for that, everyone, you end up really not pleasing anybody.
And we see that in the hotel industry all the time. I mean, something that's so important with hotel brands or any brands is really having your differentiation, your point of view, your brand's passion points, your brand's mission and vision. And so many travel brands are like, our passion is travel and being the head of the destination. I'm like, well, yeah, you're a hotel. So of course it is, but how are you going to differentiate it? And it goes back to what you said, you're trying to be everything to everyone. So you're nothing to no one and you're vanilla.
Yeah.
No one can tell you what you mean, what you stand for. And going back to earlier too, with different owners, you hear so much in the industry. And especially for me, I'm only 2 years into this short-term rental world now. You hear people say, oh, Airbnb bust, or we were looking in the Finger Lakes and we were talking to a brewery owner who owns a property. And he was like, oh, everything's just down. It's down. And then you see their listings and you're like, no, it's not. You got,
you're just not good at this. Yeah.
You got used to the pandemic, where people just wanted to get out of Dodge so badly that they would pay for anything. They would pay for the places with the unmade beds and the iPhone photos. And now guests are so much more discerning and people get frustrated about it and I was the same way at first too. I was like, I provide enough coffee and toilet paper and paper towels and firewood to get you started. And then you're on your own because that's how rentals have always been. And then I've started to think, you know what, how much money am I actually saving? That 5-star review is so much more worth it to me. And I also think when you over deliver, not to everybody, but I do think by and large, no one's taking your K cups home with them. I don't think they're stealing things from you.
Yeah, if they do, whatever. At least they left. If they leave a 4-star and steal the stuff, then I'm annoyed. Right. But I mean, yeah, I think it's just kind of the obsession with, what I would call inferred efficiency, but you're not really being efficient. And again, it goes back to your margins. Especially people who are buying short-term rentals now, with now a 7% interest rate on a DSCR loan, as opposed to, when it was cool, when you're getting everything at, 3% rate. Yeah, the numbers are different. And what a lot of people's expectations are just overblown because they look at the good properties and they're like, I'm just like that. Hey, let's go to TJ Maxx and get a couch. Nothing wrong with TJ Maxx, but if you're going for the high end, you're probably not going to get it unless you get the best couch, which sometimes does happen. You do need to be frugal and smart and eclectic, I think. But I think that people do better with a full vision. Even the people who I see are doing ones that are really just catered for bachelorette parties, that's their niche. They're going to get all of them. And I think that's a smarter way. And even if you're locationally significant, like you said, Lake George, you kind of know who's going there. It's going to be a nice little weekend trip. Some people will go and take a week, but you really have to know and understand that market. Do you worry about the people who do short-term rentals from afar and don't really know the market? I feel like that's a big part of what people think is an oversaturation.
Yeah, I'm not worried if you're doing it from afar, if you take the time to get to know it. So if you're just doing everything remotely and relying on, your cleaner or something and you're self-managing, maybe if you have a property management company, but I think I'm a bit too much of a control freak to ever trust a property management company. And we've all seen I will not name them here, but the kind of national ones who take 24 to 48 hours to answer. And when you're asking a really specific question, which happens to me in my properties a lot, where's the lemon squeezer or where's this, where's that? I can tell you exactly in which draw that is, or maybe where somebody moved it to. How is the big property managers going to know that? They've never even been inside of the properties. So I do think another thing people are kind of forgetting is initially when I believe that when people started investing in real estate, it wasn't just about cash on cash return, but it was also about this long-term wealth building strategy. And short-term rentals should be similar. Yes, the margins are often, much stronger than long-term rentals and even maybe midterm rentals, but this is an asset that we need to think about for the long term. These are guests that we need to think about for the long term, not necessarily because they're specifically returning, but because their reviews really matter. And we had one group who wrote, we had some difficulty with the Wi-Fi in his review, which was still 5 stars. He had never mentioned to me anything about the Wi-Fi. We've never had anything wrong before. And then we got a 3-night booking. And the first question the guest asked me was, I just want to make sure your Wi-Fi is good because we're going to be working from there. And that to me said, people are reading the reviews.
You read it. I read all of them. I mean, all of them.
And I think something so important within that is more how we respond to the bad reviews.
Oh, absolutely.
That is how.
Wait. I want to throw this at you right away. The worst thing that I see is when they respond the same thing every time. Yes. It's like, I'm just like, just quit. Just why you're just making your son. Yeah, you look so bad. Thank you for your stay. Please let us know. Like, come on.
We really appreciate your review, and the review was scathing. You're like, what?
Right, exactly. You're like, wow, this AI bot really doesn't get it. Yeah. But go ahead. I think it's so important that you do respond to everything, no matter what. Even if someone's off the wall, then you can get into that.
Yeah, I'm very lucky that the only poor review I've had is 1 4-star for my Lake George property. And the public review was positive. And privately, she said, you didn't provide enough, I can't remember if it was garbage bags or paper towels, and you didn't have tissues. Tissues, to me, I think tissue boxes are disgusting. It's a personal ick factor of mine, but it was a cultural thing for her that she expected that to be there. And she didn't mention to me during her stay that she didn't have enough paper towels or garbage bags. If she had, I would have got them to her instantly. And 4 stars, we have to remember, is not a bad thing, even though it still keeps me up at night, and I've been clawing my way back to 5 for a year and a half. But take the feedback, right? And so I don't like aesthetically how tissue boxes look, but now I have them underneath the bathroom sink so that if people do want them, they're there. And I've become really over delivering on like little, coffee, paper towels, toilet paper, et cetera. Cause I'm like, it's not worth it to me to get dinged to leave you a couple more rolls of whatever it is you need. But I was looking for a place also in the Finger Lakes for a different trip that we were going on. And I found this one place, and kind of similar to what you were saying earlier, it was, clean, efficient. It was fine. We weren't staying very long. The price was right. And I was thinking about it. And the star rating wasn't great. It was I think it was low 4s. And I looked, and one of the bad reviews wasn't that bad, what she said, but the way the host responded was so aggressive and nasty that I thought, I can't stay there, because if he's responding to her very tempered words like that, he feels a bit too unpredictable to me.
Yeah. I read all through it, and I think people don't understand that the reviews are part of your brand. Everything that you do is part of your brand. And like you said, I don't need tissues when I am anywhere, but if it was, I would think about it and do exactly what you did. I would put them in underneath somewhere. But what I think is interesting, I do think that when you're staying as a short-term rental guest, you have to know that a little bit of after your arrival is still a little bit of hide and seek. You have to figure out how the place works. There's not going to be a video or something for everything. You should know how to work a remote control. You should know how to open a window. So sometimes things just move, and the cleaner puts it back in the wrong place. So I think hopefully guests understand that as well, that, you have to find some stuff. I always kind of do a walk around to make sure I know where everything is, especially, when my kids were younger, just to make sure, okay, we know where all this stuff is. What's your take on stuff left in the bathroom cabinet? So I'll tell you why I'm asking this, because I go both ways. I'd rather there be nothing, but occasionally something happens and it's like 11 o'clock, and then you go in there and the ones that are full, there's some good stuff in there. It's hard to say.
I'm anti anything left anywhere, fridge, cabinet.
It seems dirty.
Even the salt and pepper and olive oil that I know we have to have, and I have. I still have a bit of an ick factor around that. And over time, spices get left behind and it becomes a bit of a thing. And occasionally I go in and do a bit of a cull. But I do think you're right. There are things that are helpful to be there. And we stayed at a short-term rental in York Beach one year. And it was one of those where there was condiments in the fridge and, leftover this and that. And actually I thought, I get it. I get how some guests, and maybe this goes back to what you were saying earlier about knowing who your target audience is. I
Yeah.
get how, like, I could see my dad arriving and being like, oh, this is so helpful. They had all of this. Whereas then you have me who's like, ooh, icky. Somebody else touched it. So
Yeah, I know. Yeah, but it's such a hard thing to say because you get there, you forgot to do the shopping, and then all your kids screaming, and then like, oh wait, look, there is popsicles. Like, that could be like a huge save. It's I personally visually and aesthetically disgusts me.
Yeah.
But then I do find myself in the cabinets they're like, well, I mean, I need some bacitracin. Like, I hope I don't have to go out just to get this. So
Right.
yeah, I think I'm my own worst enemy on that because I really want nothing, but I don't think I've ever stayed at a place where I haven't kind of looked through because something came
What
up.
we're proving is we're all damned if we do, damned if we don't.
Yeah, exactly.
There's no winning.
Right. So, but that goes to the hospitality
Yeah.
aspect. No matter who your guest is, you're just trying to do the best job to not necessarily appease them, but to make their stay what they expected. And you can do that from the beginning on. You have to keep that up.
And it's genuine. Like, I genuinely am so interested and excited to get to know my guests if they're interested in that, to get to hear what they're there to celebrate. And we all have some like really beautiful moments and stories, whether it be happy moments in life, people getting engaged or celebrating birthdays or whatnot. I had a guest book and she said her father was really ill and this was going to be their last family vacation together. I mean, that's beautiful that we get to like deliver these types of experiences. And I do think that that's something that hotels do really well, or kind of keep in mind, is that travel in general is really befitting of life's milestone moments. So if we think about weddings or honeymoons, baby moons, family reunions, like, people want to travel to have these kind of big experiences. And another thing I see a lot in the forums is like, no bachelor parties, no bachelorette parties. And I get it because our assets are like the most important or biggest investment that many of us have ever made and will ever make, myself included. And we want to be really protective of that. And I'm not saying we shouldn't have like policies and procedures and we should just let whatever happens in our house happens. Absolutely not. But I do think it's interesting to take a page out of hotel playbooks with this. So they set occupancy limits. They have quiet hours. They take personal details, whether that be financial or actual like personal details of your license and such, to protect themselves and to kind of set themselves up for success. So I don't think we should do sweeping bans on things because people spend a lot of money on those types of moments and there's money to be made.
Yeah, I remember I saw this somebody posted something on Bigger Pockets, and it was like a $3 million estate in Hawaii, but it was in an HOA. And like when he posted, I don't know why I'm not getting bookings. And then when you go to the listing, it was like there were so many restrictions from the HOA. It was like, don't go outside after 6, don't make any noise. Like, well, why am I going there? Like, I mean, give me a break. You have to know where you're buying into, and also like, stop handcuffing my vacation.
Well, and also terrible. Like you were saying about traveling with kids, I love to try to control my toddler, but she has other opinions and thoughts. And so if I see that right away, I'm thinking, oh gosh. And I've had this happen too. I've looked at people's listings and they're in all caps and they're shouty at me. By the way, you're asking me to give you my money and you're yelling at me before we've even met. And unfortunately, I see this with some hotels too, more so like the small mom and pop motels, where the first thing that pops up on the website is like, no smoking, otherwise you're going to be banned, you're going to be fined $300. And you're like,
meanwhile, they haven't washed the blanket on top of the bed for 6 years. So
that's why you can't smoke, because they're not washing the blankets.
Yeah. It's just, so I wonder how you look at hotels now that you're operating on a smaller scale, and because they're really different experiences. Just in my mind, the differentiation is just generally, if you're not in a suite, like no kitchens, no laundry, more services. But when I stay in a hotel, I put the do not disturb on. No one's coming in my room ever. I don't want anyone in my room. I don't want them touching my stuff. I don't want people looking through the room. Like, I'm good. But there is a big distinction between the two. So how are you bridging what you used to do and what you're still involved in with this new avenue in short-term rentals and the difference in the hospitality, really?
Personally, I still love hotels. I absolutely adore them. And I think, going back to guest avatars, target audience, what we saw when I was working for Starwood and then for Marriott is people weren't brand agnostic. So for me, I love the W brand, but I might choose to stay at a W hotel for a girls' trip, and I might choose to stay at a St. Regis or a Ritz-Carlton for a trip with my daughter because I know they're a bit more family friendly. And, again, going back to noise and such, there might be a bit more forgiving and whatnot. And I think the same is true with hotels and short-term rentals. People like myself are very happy to stay at both. It really just depends on the purpose of the trip. And everything you just said, that's why, especially in this stage of my life with my 2.5-year-old, short-term rentals often win for me because she can have her own room, which means when she goes to bed, I don't have to go to bed. It's like the Airbnb ad, which was absolutely brilliant.
Yeah.
If she's taking a nap, I could be sitting outside reading a book, if depending on the property, maybe swimming in someone's pool, like enjoying it a bit more. I can do laundry if I need to. I can make her food whenever she needs to. So some of those things I like to think of them as almost like short-term rental superpowers. Like there are things that short-term rentals inherently do better than hotels. And if we are able to identify those and lean into those, it helps people like myself in the decision-making process of, which one am I going to stay in? There's really no option. It's definitely going to be a short-term rental.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. Well, I wanted to ask you this because something recently happened in the hotel short-term world that I think is really interesting. So the company Getaway House, which then became Postcard Cabins, and now we found out why, was bought by Marriott. So now there's really what I believe to be the first acquisition by a hotel of what is generally, I guess, best described as a short-term rental business chain. They have a lot of cabins. I mean, they have like 30 or 40 cabins in each location. But what do you make of this for the hotel industry that now they're going to acquire something that was generally started as a one-off cabin in the woods?
Marriott, no matter your opinion on the company, is, I think, brilliant at M&A. And I'm not just saying that because I worked for Starwood Hotels, who was acquired by Marriott. So I was actually on the inside front row seat to an acquisition and how they handled it. I think they are thinking about, I think they're seeing exactly what I was just saying. People who are staying with W might also be interested in Postcard, and people who are staying at Postcard might also be interested in W. So it's almost like, how can we get the customer in? And then once they're in, Marriott's loyalty program is so sticky that it will continue to keep you there. And I think similarly, once they have these loyalty customers who then say, hey, on the outside, sometimes when I'm not traveling for business, I'm renting short-term rentals, they want to be able to play and compete in that space as well.
Yeah. What do you think is going to happen? I don't think they're really going to do much over branding. I think they're just going to do what you said. They're going to apply, hey, look, here's the loyalty points. Now you have all these other options where you can stay instead of, I don't see them taking over the brand. I think that name change must have happened for a reason as part of the plan.
What's interesting is when Starwood was acquired by Marriott, the Ritz-Carlton had been acquired 10 years prior to that. And when Marriott acquired Ritz-Carlton, they didn't do anything. They didn't change any of the shared services. Ritz-Carlton still had its own corporate headquarters. It wasn't too far from Marriott's headquarters, but it was really church and state. And it was at the time that Marriott acquired Starwood that they said, we're going through this massive merger acquisition anyway. Let's, figure out how to bring Ritz-Carlton into the fold. And of course, you have, some people who are happy about that and some people less so. But really what I think we're seeing in the hotel industry in general is that, especially for publicly traded organizations, shared services is what's winning, at least on Wall Street. So the fact that Starwood had 9 brands, Marriott had probably 21 at the time because they had 30 after the acquisition. You could more or less have the same headcount in corporate and then spread those costs out to either, 5,000 hotels or to 10,000 hotels. All of a sudden the street is going to say, we'll take that one, please. So I don't know. I think if it was a hotel brand acquisition, I could see it much more being folded into shared services model. Yeah. But I think you're right. What Postcard does is so special and so unique that I think Marriott will be as excited to learn from them as Postcard will have incredible learnings from the Marriott team and incredible distribution capabilities from being on Marriott's website and from being part of the loyalty program.
Yeah, I could see them coming up with a few more amenity options, food, things like that are deliverable from local. But yeah, it's just an interesting thing that's happening because I think it can give these bigger operators the idea, well, and Getaway, which again became Postcard, they really had a niche. I mean, it was like they didn't even have Wi-Fi in the beginning. Now they realize everybody still wants to play around because they have nothing to do. But they had a niche, and it gives hope to people who want to do this as a full-on business and figure out all the systems that if you really do it right, efficiency, client care, branding, marketing, there may be an opportunity out there, which is really interesting in startup culture.
And Marriott is an excellent operator. I mean, they know operations. So I think, like you said, it could be looking at, what is the bed? What is the type of mattress that are being used in all of those cabins? What are the types of linens? Could they get them at a much better margin because they have this huge buying power? Yeah. So I think things like that. And I think, like you said, anyone who is discounting the short-term rental industry or things that are being built in the short-term rental industry right now, seeing a major player like Marriott acquire them shows you exactly like you said, this is a very real business. And if you take it seriously, you own your niche, you're really strong about your brand, look at what could be in the future for you.
Yeah. Well, tell us a little bit about your podcast, Sweet Success, because we're recording this at 10 to 11 in the morning. And then at 2:00 today, I'm going on your podcast. We're having a two in one day.
That's right. We're flipping the mic around, you guys. So come listen to Jonathan, because I'm sure you're listening to Jonathan all the time, but we don't get to really know Jonathan, only through little bits and pieces. So I'm going to ask all the hard hitting questions that you've been yearning to know. But thank you. Yeah, the show is called Sweet Success. It's a play on Hotel Suite. It's a hospitality.fm original show. And on it, I get to talk to really cool people like yourself. I get to talk to people who are hotel executives, industry innovators, hospitality leaders, and really try to uncover the secrets behind the world's best brands. So it's just been a ton of fun because I think I come from a PR background, and when I was initially working in PR and fashion, and when I wanted to shift over to the travel industry, really the feedback I kept getting was, well, you haven't worked in travel before. And I think that's really linear to think that people are only considering booking trips when they're reading travel publications.
Yeah, right.
So similarly, I just think good inspiration is everywhere. And getting to talk to people who, you might be a real estate investor, you might be a short-term rental operator, owner, host. But just because someone isn't doing exactly what you're doing doesn't mean they don't have lessons that you can apply to your world and then make your operations better, your brand stronger. So it's just been a ton of fun.
Yeah. Awesome. And where's the best place for people to get in touch with you? Is it your main website, which is bykatiecline.com?
They can go there. I'm on social at the same thing at by Katie Cline, BY Katie Cline with a C, like Patsy. Or the podcast is sweetsuccesspodcast.com or on social at Sweet Success Podcast.
Yeah, you're pretty easy to find.
I'm easy to find. Just look for the girl in the
because
hat.
Your last name is Cline. It's just easier to find. Good job.
Thank you. Thank you, Dad.
Yeah, right. Like really placed that well. Awesome. Well, it's been a pleasure. I look forward to speaking to you again in a couple hours. But for our listeners, I really appreciate you spending the time here today. All right. That was Katie Cline of Sweet Success. I'm Jonathan Green. We'll see you next episode.
Thanks for sticking around to the end so you can get a preview of who's coming up on the next episode of Zen and the Art of Real Estate Investing. And it's Adiel Gorel, the founder and CEO of ICG International Capital Group Real Estate Investments, a world-renowned real estate investment firm founded in the Bay Area. And he has a great story of how he got started and his whole voyage teaching thousands of investors how to secure a strong financial future for college, business investments, and retirement. We'll see you next episode with Adiel.